Hello and welcome to another video on this channel. Today we're going to be talking about how to live like a philosopher, how to live philosophically in this world. Now I think that this is a very interesting topic, and it's a topic that we must talk about in the world we live in today, just because when we're going around interacting with ideas, it is very easy for us to really think about certain things, look at certain topics, and get very distracted, to move away from what is true, what is desirable to follow, and start getting caught up with ideologies, mindless ideologues, and all these dangerous things which can be observed in the world today. And as a result, one of the common antidotes to this problem is indeed to live philosophically. And by living philosophically, we are able to move beyond this mere ideology, this brainless following of ideals, this brainless following of meaning, and instead move on further to other concepts which are vital, which are beneficial for your life. So this is a very important switch. It's a very important step to take. And that's why I've decided to make this video, say, well, how do you be a philosopher? And of course, all the times where I post these long videos or these live streams, I will be taking sections out of that and putting these in somewhere else as well, so you guys can indeed check that out later on. If you can't finish watching the entire live stream, I will be putting sections of these videos, especially this first presentation part, in the front, just so that by doing so, we are able to, or you're able to find this in a bit more of an easier fashion. So let us start getting off. There's 4 points I want to talk about. They of course all tie together to some degree, and I think that by indeed having them tied together, it makes life a bit easier, because I'm just looking at something on the side. Because when you're looking at this direction, how to be a philosopher, I provide 4 points. It does indeed move in one direction, which does make life way easier. So let us turn to the first point, and that is question. Actively question being all the time. Actively question the world around you. Don't just sit there and believe. And of course, sometimes you do have to sit there and believe, but rather it's like, well, you shouldn't just mindlessly accept everything around you, but you should actually question. Because if you think about it, in the world, right, you're like, well, what are the things which mean a lot to us? What are the things which are valuable? Well, the first thing you want to think about is, well, what is it that I'm trying to achieve, and match that upon that which you need to follow. You need to match the things that you believe to what is true. So as a result, in order to do that, you must constantly question what you believe in. You must constantly question what you see in the world, because without questioning what you see in the world, it's very easy for you to go off track, and that is something which you have to try to avoid. So the first thing that's important is to indeed question. You don't want to manually accept things, because that's one of the things which one person who's philosophical has to do beyond what the normal person is. And that's why we should all be moving towards this philosophical state of being, is to constantly question. Now, the second thing is, and it ties into the first one, is to question reasonably. It's one thing just questioning for the sake of questioning, right? I mean, it's all well and good to be saying, well, okay, let's just talk about this thing. Oh, I think there's this new thing in the world. Let's just question that and go like, oh yes, there's some problems here and problems there. And that's all well and good. But the thing is what separates questioning from reasonable, useful questioning is the adherence to logical principles. It's the adherence to a search for the truth, or that which is meaningful in the world. Because if you're constantly looking at things which say, well, okay, what you should be doing is to follow a certain pathway, what you should be doing is to follow a certain goal, what then happens is that, well, that makes your questioning more direct, it makes it more specific. And that then helps you move on, and that helps you develop your thinking, which is ultimately a very valuable thing. It's a very valuable experience. Because, well, if you're questioning for the sake of questioning, that gets you nowhere, because you'd be questioning wrong. You could be questioning fallaciously. By questioning in such a way, you're not going to get anywhere. You're only going to go backwards. And that's not helpful for your development either. That's not helpful for your interaction with the world. It's not helpful for your interaction with concepts. So if you're enjoying this video so far, then make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. I upload constantly about different philosophical ideas, so this would be very helpful for you. If you haven't subscribed yet, then make sure you do so. And if you're interested in this, then of course let me know your questions in the chat or in the comments below, and we'll be having a Q&A session very soon. Now that we've talked a bit about why you have to question reasonably, we'll talk a bit about how you question reasonably. And of course, you should be all familiar with these things like logical fallacies. There's this idea of, well, you're making an argument which is fallacious. the logic in your argument doesn't make too much sense because, well, if you're looking at a situation, right, you have a situation where you go and you're like, well, these things which I see, these things which I observe in front of me don't seem to be correct. They, in fact, they do indeed seem wrong. What's an example of this? Well, an example of this would be, well, okay, you could have a fallacy of hasty generalization. You see one, two, three, or four things suggesting something, and then you're, well, like the entire set believes in that. Well, that's not very correct. That's quite a wrong argument. Or maybe an ad hominem fallacy. Instead of attacking the argument, you attack the person who's making the argument, and then that also doesn't work as well. So you can see that there's lots of ways in which you can question, but question unreasonably, unfaithfully to logic, and that's also a dangerous thing as well. It's something that you should be trying to avoid and trying to do, and that makes life way, way more helpful. But now let's say, well, you get your questioning correct. You start questioning the world. You start questioning reasonably. Well, naturally, the question then is, well, what exactly is the thing that we are meant to be questioning? Are we meant to be questioning these far-fetched ideas, questioning everything around the world, or should we be questioning more specific? And that goes to my third point, which is, well, question the nature of being and that around you. You shouldn't be questioning things, or you can be. The first things that you should be questioning is the things in a very simple and localized domain. You shouldn't be questioning far-fetched things if you don't get your first things in order. You first have to start off with yourself and then move on further. Because I think a problem with a lot of people in the world today is that they are focused on far-fetched things. They're focused on things which don't directly involve them, when their fundamental base is uncertain, it's unsecure. They haven't questioned that enough. And what happens when you focus on other things before you focus on the current thing or your life is that your presuppositions, your fundamental assumptions about the world are then wrong. And when your fundamental assumptions about the world are indeed wrong, then, well, what you then see is that you do have a problem where you can believe in all these other things that you want, and that's all well and good. But what then happens is that then distracts you from what it means to be following the truth. It distracts you from the task at hand. It distracts you from interacting with the truth. And it distracts you from actually reaching your goal. Because when you're focused on other things and your base is not good, it's like building, and this is the parable in the Bible, right? It's like building a house on unsturdy foundations. Everyone knows that that's a horrible idea. You don't build a house on sand. In the same way, you don't build a worldview based on weak arguments. So you have to question the correct things. You have to question the things which mean a lot. You have to question the things which are valuable for you and are effective in applying your worldview. You should start building off on your worldview before you start building on the world. And that's, I think, what Jordan Peterson says when he says, well, get your life in order, is that you should stop focusing on the other things in the world. Start focusing on yourself. And that will put you in good stead for focusing on other things in the world. And that's something which you can think about and something which I think is quite valuable to learn and argue and try to pursue. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you believe about these crazy things in the world, even good and perhaps even worthy causes like, well, equality of opportunity. And that's good, right? But, well, stop arguing so much for that if you don't understand why that equality is good, why you should follow it, why you should value these certain principles and ideas. And, well, that's something which is dangerous, and that's something which you probably should think about improving when you are interacting with the world. And that's why you should be questioning the nature of being and that around you. You shouldn't be questioning just about everything in the world. Question the things which are important first and then develop further. And that would put you in better stead than just randomly questioning the nature of being, and that's that. Now, the fourth thing is, well, and this is an important thing, is to live in such a way that represents your findings. And I think that this is a valuable thing because, well, you should live in a way which reflects your philosophy instead of going the other way around. And why do I say that? It's, well, when you're interacting with the world, it's absolutely vital that you are able to be faithful to your philosophy. I think that one of the dangers of a lot of people is like, well, they make an argument, and that's all right, right? They make a very simple argument for a certain idea, concept, and argument. But the main problem is that they make an unwarranted jump. They make an unwarranted leap towards a certain conclusion, right? They start arguing in a certain way, and after that, they make a conclusion, and they don't live it out. And, well, then what's the point of making that question or making the argument in the first place? It goes back to the question about question the nature of being and that around you. The reason why you're questioning the nature of being and that around you is precisely because you want to live it out is precisely because you want to have a correct worldview in which you can interact the world with. So if you have a correct worldview which you interact the world with, then naturally you should live it out. Because if you don't live it out, then that defeats the purpose of the third one, and in fact then defeats the purpose of the second one, and then the entire structure collapses. So it's absolutely vital that you live it out. And in some ways, you might say, well, you can't live out philosophy. Well, that's a good indicator that your philosophy is wrong. If you can't live your philosophy out, then you should go back and think about it and say, have I made some mistakes along the way? Is my reasoning incorrect somewhere along the way? Because if you can't start off by living that philosophy out, there's a very, very good chance that your philosophy is indeed wrong and incorrect and in need of improvement and in desire of strengthening or changing. And that's not something which is bad. You should always be willing to change your arguments. That's something which is very important. Now, of course, another thing which you want to be looking at is really the question of, well, how then shall you live it out? Because you could say, well, what if the conclusions I get is constantly very depressing? Or what if the conclusions I get aren't very livable? Well, the answer is to read more, right? There's a lot of different philosophies in the time. There's a lot of philosophies throughout history which approach the concepts and the arguments in different ways. And as such, you shouldn't really be afraid of not being able to find the correct philosophy, but rather you should be more afraid about following the wrong philosophy which cannot be lived out in the world. Now, at the end of the day, you have to look at it from a bit of a pragmatic perspective and say, well, all right, I might get things wrong, and that's completely fine. You should recognize that you might not get everything right, and that is completely fine. That's not necessarily a major flaw. Rather, what the main danger really is to start randomly accepting things, which then leads you down to ideologies. And when the moment you hit a mindless ideology, then, well, that is kind of the end of the story, because the moment you fall into that trap, it's very difficult to be saved from that trap. And that's essentially what you see in Dostoevsky's Demons, or even in his history in Maoist China and communist in the Soviet Union, right? That was the kind of the mindless ideology that people fell into, which then led to further tyranny. So that's something that you want to think about. So that's kind of the 4 points about how to be a philosopher. If you're enjoying this so far, then make sure you like and subscribe. It means a lot to me, and it really helps this channel grow. Now, of course, if you're interested in anything, then feel free to let me know in the chat. The live Q&A section does indeed start now, so if you have any questions, then feel free to join here, and I'll happily see your questions. Now, I will indeed go and check something out. It says my bitrate isn't very good, but feel free to put some questions in the chat, and I'll happily do that for you, and I'll happily do that with you. So feel free to enjoy that, and I'll see you there. Are there any questions for me in the chat, my dear friends? I'll happily just sit here and wait for questions if there are any, but yeah, I wonder if there are any questions right now. I'll be able to answer them for you, or any just ideas or philosophy in general, right? That is something which is very interesting. I like doing. We did that quite a lot in the other time as well, so that is something which is quite interesting, something we could interact with. Now, of course, you can also check out my other YouTube channels that I do indeed run. There is a channel called Joshua Yen, where I do talk about university advice and life skills, kind of like how to ace an interview, or well, how to do well in in a school or something like that. And that's why I do on Joshua. And I also do a bit of gaming on Zarathustra. That's a channel I also run as well. Quite interesting. That those two channels do quite well, actually. I think I find them quite enjoyable, in my personal opinion. I find them quite well, and that's kind of where else you can find me on YouTube at times. But yeah, I mean, let me know any of your questions about anything, and we will see how it goes. And of course, if you have missed out on the main part of the stream, or if you've missed out on the kind of the presentation, then feel free to go back and skip it and then watch the entire presentation in its full, where I talk about how to be a philosopher. I go through a few steps in which you do go around to be a philosopher. I go through, of course, the idea that you should question it. You should question what you believe. You don't mindlessly follow things, and you should also be reasonable and be open to approaching the world in a way which is valuable, in a way which helps your life and helps you improve as well. And that's something which is quite valuable and interesting as well. So a few ways in which you can go around doing things, and I think it's quite helpful in general. So that's something you should think about, and that's something that you can do definitely. And that's something which is quite interesting. Now I'll wait a bit more, see if there's any questions in the chat, and then if there's none, then I will end the stream, and we will see. And I'll see you next week, where I do another live stream. But that might be on a bit of something else, and that could be quite interesting as well. So feel free to let me know your thoughts, your ideas, and of course I will interact with you there. Next one, of course, I'll put your questions as well. You could always ask me questions in the chat, and I'll happily answer you. There, I tried to do a bit more of these community posts, which would allow you to interact with me a bit more and make things a bit more interesting, a bit more fun as well. So hopefully that would be valuable as well, and that would be quite interesting, because at the end of the day, there are quite interesting things here, and perhaps I could share my screen as I go through a few of the different polls which were made. And I'm sharing my screen now. Let me put it up. You can see the few of the polls I made, which are quite interesting. You know, I mean, I try my best to do these polls so I can interact with you a bit better, right? So you do see here, there's what's the favorite argument for God. Cosmological gets quite a lot of votes. However, there's also good arguments of ethics. Pragmatism is quite good. The ethical argument, indeed, that's quite valuable as well. I do like ethical is important, right? You imagine you're a Star of Life player. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it's kind of like your actions, right? It's like what makes you live in the best possible way possible, right? That's quite valuable as well. And then arguably I should have called that contingency instead of cosmological. That might be more precise maybe, but is what it is, I guess. What you doesn't have to be adhered to. Yep, that works. As well as I think a lot of things are quite funny here. What comes up in these polls are quite funny. I do quite enjoy them as well. How do I go out of this? I don't know how to get out of this. I think that's one of the problems, right? Is that this is a bit of a problem. I perhaps could have done a live post, but I did a live post about this stream yesterday as well. So maybe we could respond to it's not rocket surgery with Germania, but that's not something I can constantly be bothered with right now. It's not something I'm very worried about. However, we can indeed go back to the YouTube channel and look at the community, and that's something which is quite interesting. Also, post apologetics Jordan Peterson shorts. I mean, the Jordan Peterson shorts have been doing quite well on this channel. They've been doing quite well. I mean, if you look at the channel, most of my views do come from Jordan Peterson shorts. So it's quite interesting, but it's what it is. I mean, I have to kind of balance getting more subscribers. And the funny thing is that you guys voted for me to do it in the afternoon which is this slot, which got less views actually than the morning slot, which is quite interesting. I'll have to see how that gets balanced out, because it seems like the morning slot actually gets more comments and more interaction. So it's quite an interesting thing, you know. It's quite strange. So I mean, I'll have to kind of see how this goes out. I'm kind of doing alternate weeks until I figure out what actually is consistently better, because this might just be an outlier. But now more live streams. You guys want more live streams, and of course you can check out my channel Joshua Yen here. That is quite fun and a good thing to watch. And a few other things here. I do kind of post quite a lot of stuff here, just to kind of provide you with content and provide you with kind of insight into different things about how the community interacts and stuff like that. So I'm going to end the live stream here, just because I don't think there is much going on right now. I don't think there's many people online, so that's understandable. That's fine as well. So make sure you like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. and stay safe, my friends. I'll see you in the next one. See you soon. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. I'll see you next one, and stay safe.